mostly known for his pioneer research in the field of Christian ufology, a combination of ancient astronaut theory and end times prophecy. He's been a paranormal researcher for over 30 years, and Milor's interest in understanding the paranormal began at 5 years old after he heard his great-grandmother's tale of seeing a UFO over 100 years ago. His great-grandmother's tale is unique because she was the wife of a minister for 60 years. This story and many other otherworldly encounters in his family have fueled Milor's quest to understand a wide variety. Milor's latest book is Christian Ufology. It was featured in the New York Times. Milor draws from an extensive academic background with 2 associate degrees, a bachelor and 2 master's degrees in advanced military education. Milor is a retired military combat veteran and chief master sergeant. He began his military career as an active duty Army infantry M60 gunner, retired as chief of cyber operations for the U.S. Western Defense Sector. So welcome, John. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
And we should start off right from the beginning. How can people get your books? Is on your website is johnmilor.com. Can they get them there?
Yeah, I have a couple of websites actually. So you'll see here.
Yeah, let's do your share screen. I see it there.
Okay, so this up here is my main website, johnmilor.com. These other websites go to johnmilor.com, and they're easier to remember probably because they're not a person's name, but they're the name of the book, Christian Ufology, anything like that. My mom would say that she believed in Jesus, even though it was like, I don't know. I don't know where she's at on that in terms of what her faith extends to. But she does have a respect for who he was and who he still is. And my dad recently passed away, so I kind of think he may have come full circle near the end of his life. He did ask me and my brother to pray for him before he died, which that is a far cry different than his younger days when he used to joke around about when you're dead, you're 6 feet under. But he had other conflicting issues with that. You know, you could say he's a classic agnostic because he actually saw his dead grandfather. And, you know, I meant to get into that with him. Like, okay, you believe when you're dead, you're 6 feet under, but how do you explain seeing your grandfather's ghost when you were a kid? So he would have joked about it, but then on the other side of the coin, he would have probably got all intellectual and discussed that, you know, yeah, there probably is a God, maybe someone who designed the universe. The universe is complicated. It does indicate that there's a designer behind it. As for him being a personal, loving God, that was a part he probably struggled with. And I found later in, you know, when his mother, my grandmother Ruth, was experiencing Alzheimer's, she would go back into the past and talk about people's histories and divulging all these things that probably they wished she didn't. But I found out that my dad was going to get married to a girl that he was seeing in high school. She got into a terrible horsing accident and it made her mentally handicapped. And my dad kept seeing her, you know, and she got frustrated and was trying to tell him to leave, you know, go live your life. Don't waste your time with me because I will hold you back. And she was so frustrated and depressed about what happened to her, she ended up committing suicide. And I think that threw my father into a sort of just this whole crisis of faith. Like, really? But in terms of a heritage of faith in our family, as you read in my bio, my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather, they were a ministry team. And during the Great Depression, they traveled the United States, preaching the gospel of Jesus. People were really hungry to hear some kind of truth about hope for a brighter future and purpose to life. So they did do that for many years. I remember that my great grandmother was just this very spiritual person that spent time with me and my brother whenever we come over and tell us about Jesus and stuff, and some of her stories of the miraculous. In this respect, my great grandmother was kind of a mystic and had some unusual tales. Uh, she said she was saved once by an angel. She was choking to death from carbon monoxide poisoning, and prayed to God to save her because she felt herself dying. And she said when she cried out, the bedroom door opened and a guy walked in and grabbed her and rolled her over. And she said his description was very unusual. He was a type of soldier. He was wearing some kind of military uniform. And on top of that, he had this helmet, this pickle hob helmet with a spike on top. The Prussian soldiers used to wear those, I think, in the 1800s, a long time ago. But she saw this, and then he turned around and walked out. Didn't stick around for a conversation. So she got up and walked out of the room into the living room where he went, and the front door was still locked with a chain across it. So however he got into that house defies explanation. But he was physically there, and he physically grabbed her and rolled her over. So that was one of her stories. Another even more dramatic account than that was when she was older, she had a stroke, and it almost killed her. When she was lying in the hospital, she was paralyzed on the left side of her body. She couldn't talk, and she was stuck in that bed. They didn't know how her recovery would go, or if she would ever talk or walk again. And she said while she was in that state, laying in the hospital, Jesus walked into her hospital room, physically manifest, that he was glowing in the spirit, and that he smiled at her. And when he smiled at her, the left side of her body came back, and she was completely healed. So this is an account that, of course, her whole church had to know about this, and it was an astounding miracle. I'm sure they were all praying about her praying for her because they were in an intercessory prayer team themselves, always praying for people, and then it was her turn, and she was on the receiving end of that and saw dramatic healing as a result. The doctors, they were mystified and like, it's a miracle. If she were Catholic, they would have had to declare that a miracle. But yeah, she walked out of that hospital just fine, as if nothing ever happened. So these kinds of stories people could expect from Grandma because she was all about Jesus. I mean, prayed every day, all the time. If the TV was on in that house, it was an evangelist. If the radio was playing, it was gospel music. And she was always just talking about Jesus somewhere in the conversation, and completely immersed in her faith. And one time I was there at 5 years old at my grandmother's house, and there was a bunch of family members there. I think it was like Thanksgiving, New Year's, or Christmas, something like that, because a bunch of people were there from the family. Grandma's reading the newspaper on the couch while everybody else is just sort of talking all over the living room. And Grandma suddenly lowers the newspaper to make an announcement to the family. She reads an article in the newspaper about a wild goose chase between the police and UFO. And her description in the story was like that opening scene in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now, keep in mind, she read this account in 1975. That movie came out in 1976. This was not the only place that kind of thing happened. They also had an event like that happen in Ohio, and I got some newspaper articles of that happening in other places, but it did happen in Madera County. And I remember, I'm only 5 years old, but I'm processing, this story and the looks on people's faces when Grandma's reading the paper and wondering, why is she reading this? this is a mixed metaphor here. We're not used to mixing sci-fi and fantasy like this, you know. I mean, I guess you could say that, but you could have heard a pin drop in there. And then when she finished reading, she dropped the paper and she said, "When I was a little girl, I saw a UFO."
Oh, so she admits it to the family then.
Yeah, and she told a
Wow.
story on the plains of Kentucky, um, back at the turn of the century. They saw this silver, seamless shaped, cigar shaped UFO fly by right in front of them. It was so close, they saw this transparent bubble on top, and the occupant turned and looked at him. He didn't wave, but I mean, he turned and looked at him as he flew by, like, yeah, look at that, some humans down there.
Well, that's impressive. Turn of the century, long before Roswell.
Yeah, and she and her sister had never even seen an automobile before. They had a wagon. They didn't live in town. They lived out in the sticks, in the plains of Kentucky. So they were like, they had no frame of reference to catalog what they were looking at. And it flew off. It went over these bluffs and zipped off into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. They ran home. They told their mother. She told them never to tell anything about that story to anyone ever. Period. And they didn't know why, you know, she was so strict about that, but they kept their mouth shut. And a couple years later, her sister died. So this is my grandma and her sister that saw this. So they at least had each other to confide in. But when her sister died, she had it all to herself. And I guess the years passed. And there she is on the couch, you know, what, 60, 70 years later, reading this newspaper article. And it all came back. And she's like, ah, I remember that. And she had to get it off her chest. You know what? When I was a little girl, I saw that. And I don't care what people think. Those things are real.
So how did the family react when she said this?
Kind of like I said, you could have heard a pin drop. People nod their head. You know, okay, grandma saw Jesus and she saw aliens, I guess. And, well, interesting story, grandma. Cool. You know, and on with their business they went. But me being 5 years old, I am like all about, you know, tell me more. And I was the annoying kid, right? That why, 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 why? Until you end up with because God said so. That's how He made it. Now leave me alone. Um, and so I was bugging my mom, and my mom, instead of shutting me down, like a lot of parents would do, my mom would humor me and actually answer me and continue this dialogue with me. So she's part of what fueled my intellectual curiosity
Oh, that's
in my
good.
later days.
So what
And
year was that with your
that
grandmother's
was
story?
1975.
Okay, so
That I
UFOs
heard
were
that.
well known in our culture.
That's when I heard the story. When she saw it, it was at the turn of the century. So she didn't know what it was. Uh, had no frame of reference for it back when she saw it. But of course, reading the newspaper articles, she's like, "Oh, this is what I saw." You know, this thing in the sky buzzing around, and you know, so she must have seen something about UFOs or whatever before, and connected the dots up, updating her memories with more modern
Yes, there was media about
things.
UFOs at that time. There's media on it.
But my great grandmother didn't have this compelling need to reconcile these two things. For her, it's just, you know, okay, that's part of God's creation. You know, God created us, God created them. What's the problem? Um, but for me, I was really into the New Age and stuff back then. I would have said I was a Christian, but like I didn't really understand the Bible. I never read it cover to cover. I didn't understand the concept of the Trinity, that the Bible literally says God the Father, outside of time space, created all creation, and He embedded Himself in creation in the person of Jesus and made all creation, that Jesus and His Father are as one. And Jesus is not just like an alien, like another being that's out there. He is God, who became a human being and walked among us. And the significance of that is beyond what a lot of people conceive. That he's not normal. He's God and man. Uh, God actually had to lay down his all-powerful omniscience and power to become a human, else he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. He wouldn't have been hired. Wouldn't have needed to eat or go to the bathroom. It wouldn't have been possible to crucify him and kill him, um, had he not laid down his divine power and knowledge. So while he was here, he did what is said in Greek. The word is kenosis. He laid aside his divinity, become human. So he was still divine in the sense of his character, in the sense of his obedience to what he knew is good, and setting the standard for that. But in terms of his power, I mean, he could have obliterated the planet at any time, but he didn't. So that kind of knowledge I didn't have when I was younger. I just believed like, okay, God created everything, and it makes sense that God would be love. That I would have agreed to. That I think I kind of understood that. Um, but other aspects of God in Christianity, in terms of like him becoming a human being and living a life here among humanity to be an example of how we should live and treat each other, and then to pay the penalty for not doing that as his means of, okay, I know you can't cut it because my standard is perfection and nobody can live up to that. So I'll pay the price for that standard. And then you come to me. And if you ask me forgiveness and you mean it, I will grant you forgiveness. That kind of thing, that was out of my mind. It didn't really get that far into it. Later in life, I had an encounter with Jesus myself. He came to me in a dream. And so, like a lot of people will say that they became a Christian because of an altar call or something that a friend talked to them and they started reading the Bible, or, all these different stories that people have about what led them to believe that um, Jesus is who he said he was. But for me, my story was different, kind of radically different, because I woke up believing one thing, and I went to bed believing one thing. I woke up believing completely like Jesus is actually a real person who's still alive, can actually come to earth, does come to earth and visit people in person sometimes. And I heard the name Jesus audibly spoke in my ear. And with that name, all this love just completely showered over me. And I felt his presence right there in my room, and a knowledge of who he was and a hunger to know more about who he is. And after that, I started reading the Bible immediately, basically, the first day. So up until that time, being a kid from a very young age, um, I was very into the paranormal and to learn about the unknown mysteries of the universe and things like that. The older I got, the more I studied, and then I eventually got into experimenting, and I got into ghost hunting. I was reading tarot cards and palm reading and casting runes and gazing at crystals and astral projection, remote viewing, you name it. I was into it, and I experimented with different things, and I actually learned a lot about the reality of the spiritual realm, um, minus the Christian adjustment. So uh, I learned about the reality of demons. So I knew that there were evil things there and stuff, but I wasn't really connecting the dots and putting everything together, right? Because a lot of the things I was doing that your average Christian would have said, "You what? Um, yeah, you shouldn't do that. Playing with Ouija boards is a bad idea. Trying to channel spirits. Bad idea. Um, but I was into all of that up until this dream. Then I was like, okay, I got a clean slate. I'm just going to read the Bible and then with an open mind reassess everything that I've learned up until now. And I was 21 years old at that time. And of course, I knew a lot about ETs, crop circles, cattle mutilations, alien abductions, the Betty and Barney Hill story, I mean, just on and on and on um, about all this lore um, with UFOs and stuff. I was a walking encyclopedia of the paranormal. Um, so really unusual as a new Christian, probably, and certainly, going into my first Christian church, um, I told them that my house was infected with demons because it was. There was poltergeist activity happening all over the place. Something about becoming a Christian kind of ignited uh, uh, chain reaction of things in my house because all the things I was into was probably opening up all these portals in the spiritual realm. My house probably looked like spiritual, Swiss cheese with portals. Um, and there was all kinds of creepy and demonic poltergeist type activity going on uh, after I had that dream. It's like my eyes open. And then all the stuff that was already there kind of got pissed off. Um, so I'm like, okay, I got to go to a church to get baptized, because I got to do something. This stuff is like happening right in front of me. I'm like yelling at it, holding the Bible, and it doesn't care. So I'm missing something. Um, I go to a church, and that wasn't really impressed with that first church I went to. The guy said to demons, it's not a real thing, and he had a degree in demonology, so he knew it. I'm like, well, tell that to the demons in my house. Just get me baptized, please. I just want to be baptized. I don't want to be baptized just to be able to maybe have more authority, but um, I want to be baptized anyway. So please just get me baptized. And then, so they did. And I was able to do an exorcism on my house after that and cast the stuff out. So I'm like, okay, validation. I'm seeing this demonic stuff happen. I go get baptized. I come back. I'm able to cast it out. So I have something that I didn't have before. And of course, when I started reading the Bible, right away, Genesis, you know, chapter 6. So just 2 or 3 pages in, I'm reading about the sons of God intermarrying with the daughters of men, sons of God being angels, if you're reading context, and then marrying the daughters of men. Like I'm like, what? Angels having sex with women? How's that? I thought they were spirits. I thought they like go through walls and they're no more like ghosts. They're physical. They can do that. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, wait a second. I know what this is. And then I remembered, some of this ancient astronaut stuff. So back then, this was in the 80s, or no, 90s, early 90s.
Did you think it was the angel shape shifting into human form?
So that's a traditional idea that Christians will say angels will take a physical form, that they could do that temporarily and then mate with a human being. It's like a temporary body. But biologically, that doesn't make sense. What I think now is an updated version that's more compliant with quantum physics, what we know of reality, multiple dimensions, our multidimensional reality that we live in. So according to M theory, they believe that there's 11 dimensions, actually. And I think part of this comes from my academic background, having some science and stuff under my belt, going through biology class, and then all of this paranormal knowledge and stuff, and knowing about the reality of ETs out there being physical beings. But then, of course, now you know about the propulsion system that they use. They have to be able to fold space. And folding space usually comes with folding time space. And they go from point A to point B, light years in the blink of an eye. That's how this propulsion has to work. And to fold space, they're actually popping out of this dimension. and popping in somewhere else. That requires a quantum physics level of understanding to do that. And because of that, these beings might not even be from this dimension. They might be from other dimensions. But then that got me to thinking about multidimensional beings or extra dimensional beings. Even a human being is multidimensional, if you think about it. We have a spirit inside of a physical body. The physical body is an interface for a transdimensional spirit to enter and interact in this third dimension. But when our physical body dies, our spirit will come out. And most people believe this. You know, my dad might have conceded to that much, having seen his ghost of his grandfather. So this understanding of what the body, of what the spirit is, there's other things that came to my mind, you know, as I'm reading the Bible and writing these notes in the margins and stuff. For example, ghost hunters will use gadgets, and spirits can manipulate radio waves. They can manipulate electricity. They can do things, particularly poltergeists. They would not be able to do that if they weren't composed of some kind of matter, because matter requires the movement of electrons, and you cannot move electrons and manipulate them if you're not composed of matter. It would not be, you're not here, essentially. This universe requires matter to exist in. And I think this is a big misconception that a lot of Christians have. They think of angels as non-physical, purely non-physical, can become physical when they want to, but then they go back to being non-physical. My understanding of this reality is that angels are always physical, and it's our understanding of physicality that is lacking. They're able to take the molecular structure of the bodies that they have that are physical and adjust them, and it pops them into this dimension, which they're probably not native to, but they can do this at will because they have the innate power to be able to do that, adjust their molecular frequency. And it makes them pop in here. They're not naturally native to this environment, so it's probably kind of like a person holding your breath and jumping into a swimming pool. You can go down there for a little while, swim around, holding your breath, but you don't really belong there. If you need technology to augment you, you could be down there a long time. But innately, you could do it for a little bit and then you have to pop back out. I think angels are in the exact same boat. I think a lot of the beings that come here are not from this dimension. They're from other dimensions, but they're using technology or innate abilities to pop into this dimension, but they are physical beings.
So what about like the book of Genesis? Is that how you would interpret it, like marrying the daughters of man? That's what they did?
Yes. I
think they're here temporarily?
I think they came here, that those were the sons of God. They were very powerful. They probably had the ability to be in this dimension for as long as they wanted.
Yeah, I think so. That makes sense.
They were composed of a type of genetics with DNA compatible with our own. In fact, their DNA was so advanced and so powerful or flexible, whatever you call it, they could even cross with animals. According to the book of Jasher, and I think it's alluded to in Enoch, that they crossed with animals and humans. So there's two types of Nephilim that I talk about in my book. The ones that are most prominent are human angel hybrid. Those are Nephilim. And they were giants, coincidentally, even though the original word Nephilim in Hebrew is translated as fallen one. But when it translated into Greek, they translated it as giant because the word is so close to giant. And a lot of them were, incidentally, giants. So they just translated it as giants, but not all of them were giants. For example, Genesis chapter 11, Nimrod, the king mentioned there at the Tower of Babel, he was most likely a Nephilim. He might have been just normal height person, but an amazing and extremely powerful warrior. The Bible doesn't talk a lot about him other than the name Nimrod is more likely a title, and it means rebel in Hebrew. So you read about this warrior, this powerful guy, you don't get a lot about whether he was even good or bad, and then God destroys the language of the people there at that time at the Tower of Babel. But there's a Sumerian version of that story. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is actually Nimrod, and he fills in the gaps. The reason he's building this tower is to defy the god that brought the flood that destroyed the Nephilim. He wanted to go up into his tower. So if a flood comes again, he's just like, giving the finger to God.
Oh,
And
I
so
didn't know that.
he was a rebel. And the Hebrew Bible actually says, here's how the guy really was, in terms of calling him a rebel. But the Epic of Gilgamesh casts Gilgamesh as a hero. And it goes further into details about how they took him up in their sky chariot and what the earth looked like from outer space, and all of these details. Says that his mother was 2/3 God, so that defines him as a Nephilim. So it's kind of interesting because you're able to read this Sumerian and cross-reference. He's talking about the flood. He's talking about escaping the flood, and you're like, oh, okay. So these guys are saying this dude is so awesome. He's practically worthy of worship. But the Hebrew Bible says he's a jerk. He's a rebel. He's scum. And the same with the account of Genesis chapter 6. If you look in the Greek mythologies, if you look in the Indian Vedas, if you look in actually legends of the Apache and different Indian nations here in America, all over the world, there's stories about the flood and there's stories about giants that were all over the planet. These stories, most of them depict these beings as gods worthy of worship, and that people worship them. Baal, for example, human body, bull's head, extremely powerful, and people worship Baal. Honestly, there probably really was a being that we also call it a minotaur in the Greek mythology. So the
So
minotaur.
you think this was genetic manipulation by ETs?
So here's the thing: it could have been either way. Their genetics was so advanced that they could have shapeshifted into an animal and mated with that animal, and then had this hybrid animal angel hybrid. And then, honestly, this is the foundation of your entire pantheon of cryptids. Bigfoot is probably like some kind of gorilla angel hybrid, and it has abilities, like supernatural abilities, stealth abilities. I think the Bigfoot are able to just pop in and out. So they can like walk around people. And I know personally someone who had this happen to them. A friend of mine and a group of his friends on a camping trip tried to hunt a Bigfoot that stole their buck. They shot a prize buck, and then while they were going to get it, this thing stepped out, grabbed it, threw it over its shoulder, disappeared into the brush.
Wow.
This thing grabbed a 750-pound buck and whipped it over its shoulder with one arm like it was nothing, and it just disappeared. It walked bipedal, and the guy was shocked. Who was looking at it through the scope of his rifle? It was so quick; it just snatched it and disappeared. He was like, "What?" And his friends were right there, like 10 feet away, and they were going through the brush, and they couldn't see. And when they got there, it was gone.
Wow. What's the when and where did this happen? It's an amazing account.
This had to be early 80s, because this friend of mine, I knew him in high school. And this is when he lived in Arkansas, and I knew him when he lived in California when I was in high school. So I would say 83, 84, around then.
That was in Arkansas?
In Arkansas. And they were a group of them. And then they broke up into two teams trying to hunt this Bigfoot. And they heard it walking around them. They could smell it on and off. Horrible stench.
But they couldn't
this
see
thing
it,
was,
you mean?
This thing was messing with them big time.
I just want to
when they
comment.
got
There's a Buddhist explanation of the Bigfoot. The Buddha called them yaka, and it describes it as an interdimensional deva. A deva is like a heavenly being, and they can phase into our existence, and they're physical, and then they can phase back out. That explains why you don't see bodies of them.
Yeah. That's the same thing that I'm saying, actually, except how they came into being is most likely that they're cross between angelic beings and an animal species, like primate in this case. But you also have all these pantheon of Set, human body, dog head, Horus, bird head, human body. And then they also mixed different animals. So, hey, these beings were also intellectually savvy as well. I mean, they had these chariots, these interdimensional vehicles. So this is another area where Christians have a hard time grasping what I'm talking about, because I think it's more like Star Wars, right? You got these Jedi Knights who have supernatural power. Only a Jedi Knight, according to the original movies, could use a lightsaber. There was something in them, the Force, that they were able to do that. They could do telekinesis and stuff like that. When they died, they just poof disappeared when they reached that highest level of the Jedi Knight class. Um, so they had supernatural character attributes. However, they also used technology. They combined the both. They combined them. And the Star Wars universe is so accurate. And the fact that it's even a Star Wars, we're literally in a Star Wars right now. Um, when God first created all creation, it was a perfect, harmonious existence for who knows how long. Could have been billions of years. And the Bible actually talks about Satan's throne being on this planet, um, predating humanity. And this is seen in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, the book of Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28 also talks about Satan, Lucifer, walking amidst the stones of fire, and that when he fell from glory after he rebelled, he was prohibited from walking amidst the stones of fire. I think the stones of fire is a reference to solar systems, that he had a multidimensional intergalactic kingdom that was vast beyond comprehension. Uh, Genesis 12:4 states that the dragon dragged a third of the stars from the sky. So this is the rebellion. He deceived a lot of the angels. And God, at that point, defeated him through the archangel Michael. Michael confronted him. I think that there's evidence of this destruction that happened in our own solar system. Uh, there used to be some kind of thing on the moon, for example, on the dark side of the moon. For those that follow that there's this giant dome and it's destroyed, but it's from ancient times. There used to be a civilization on Mars, life on Mars, water on Mars. It was wiped out.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was part of Satan's kingdom. I think that there was a civilization on Saturn. Interesting fact about Saturn: the rings of Saturn are perpendicular to its orbit, which is odd. It's like that. The rings are spinning like this while it's in orbit around the sun, like that. It's like something hit it so big and so hard that it flipped it 90 degrees. And it's been like that ever since, because its orbit is not natural to a natural formation. And then we also have the asteroid belt. And my theory follows with what they call the exploded planet hypothesis. And I talk about that in Aliens in the Bible, first postulated by Richard Hoagland. And he based his research on other astronomers, where they believe that we used to have a planet, Astera, they call it, by reference, that blew up. And the fragments of that planet destroyed life on Earth at that time, in a destruction that is like a long, long time ago. So if you look at the geological data, you see this gigantic crater off the coast of Florida. It's about 100 miles wide. Probably, they say that was a planet killer. It might have been that came from that explosion. And then a chunk hit Mars, wiped Mars out. A chunk hit Venus or Saturn, wiped that out. So the whole civilization in this universe completely obliterated. And it was cast in darkness. And this planet was lifeless for who knows how long, thousands of years. The Bible actually refers to this. Right in the very beginning, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Chapter 1, verse 1, very first sentence. That is done. He's done. He created the heavens and the earth. They're done. They're complete. The very next sentence says, "And the earth was formed and without void." A lot of people read over that. And then it talks about waters covering the face of the deep, and then the waters separating from the dry land, and all the creation story. Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 through chapter 2, verse 25 is God taking this planet that was obliterated, clearing out the darkness, separating the water from the land, and cleaning it up and making it livable again, and then creating the Garden of Eden again, and then capstone achievement, creating Adam and Eve with his hands, Genesis 2:7, formed them up, created them, put them in the garden, and said, okay, here you go. So that's 7 days of creation was reforming the earth to a habitable state. As for the heavens, they were already there. Stars were there, sun's there. Where it says he set them, I looked up the words set the stars. I mean, I researched all the Hebrew and all of this, and it actually makes sense when you research the original words. The word became void and without form. That's the word tohu in Hebrew. That's a destructive word. It refers to a destructive act. That's not God creating. That's God destroying what was here. And the earth was wiped out. God destroyed it with a flood. So it was hit with something, trashed the planet, completely diluted water over the face of the entire earth. And it took a very long time just sitting like that, completely obliterated, before God came in and restored it to a habitable state. It also talks about this destruction. This destruction was basically Lucifer led an armada to God's kingdom, which is in the northern hemisphere of the universe. God actually refers to the direction of north as a planet in the universe with God's throne on it. So Jesus has an actual physical throne on a physical planet. There's a city, New Jerusalem. It's on that planet right now. It might be dimensionally shifted, like in a higher dimension, but it's in our universe. When you look up in the sky, you're looking at heaven. The word in the Bible for heaven is Shamim. It's a plural word. In most instances, it refers to the sun and the moon and the stars. It's first defined in Genesis 1:24. So when people think of heaven as like completely separate from reality, that's not accurate. It's heaven is there's 3 heavens. There's a heaven immediately around the earth. That's the sky. And there's in a higher dimension, there's Earth is a larger planet. Directly above our head, there's another lithosphere with another civilization, just like this planet. Every bit as physical as this planet.
Yeah, well,
but
it's
it's a
similar
larger
in
planet.
Buddhist cosmology. We have different heavens. There's like 6 heavens in the central sphere, so it could be in the atmosphere, it could be above our heads. It's not. I'm not entirely sure what the Buddhist view is of that.
It's okay with multidimensional theory. I actually
Yeah,
have a
multidimensional.
diagram that I did of the Earth being an onion of lithospheres with all these layers. The Bible says hell is in the heart of the earth. So in a lower dimension with much less glory, Earth is a smaller planet, and it's a really crappy place with lots of
Yeah, we've
fire
got hell too in
and
Buddhism, and we have hot hells and various hells.
mhm,
Could be in the center of
yeah,
the earth. Could be.
yeah. Um, it said that Jesus descended into the earth after he was crucified and died on the cross. He descended to the earth, that there were captives down there. There was divided into 2 locations, a place of the righteous dead and a place of the unrighteous dead. And that was a place of torment. And Jesus went to both places. He went to proclaim victory to the unrighteous dead. And then he went to release the captives of the righteous dead and let them out of there. So even though it was a place of paradise, also known as Abraham's bosom, it was a comfortable place, a peaceful place, but it's not where God's throne is. And he wanted them to be released from this place to be where he is. So he went down there, and right after he went on the cross, then he took those captives back to the kingdom. And Isaiah refers to that also, releasing the captives. A light is shined in the darkness. Um, so the underworld in this earth was the structure of the underworld changed. The paradise part was vacated, and of course the dark forces invaded that area. Now they took it over since then. But there still is entire civilization. It's a smaller planet in a lower dimension beneath us, and in a higher dimension, Earth is a bigger planet. Um, Deuteronomy chapter 32, I believe, discusses how the regions of the earth are actually divided amongst the beings that live in that higher realm, and that they are ruling authorities over the areas underneath them.
That's
I
interesting.
suspect
Yeah.
America's, probably a decent being that rules. One of these watchers, actually. So some of the watchers are fallen, some of them are still faithful. Michael, for example, I think he might have been a watcher. Um, the Benai Elohim in the beginning. Obviously, he didn't sin against God, mating with women. He stayed faithful to God. Gabriel, another angel mentioned by name in the Bible, faithful to God. Gabriel and Michael probably were both among the Benai Elohim, the same order with which Satan came from, most likely. But these beings remained faithful to God while others fell away. And their existence is still on this planet, the higher first dimension heaven. Um, so it's an interesting, colorful world that we live on with this dynamic of regional structures, the same as we have here with continents, rulers, leaders, uh, powers, principalities, the Bible says. But in a higher realm, it's the same thing. It's and Romans chapter 20 describes the things you can understand that are in the unseen realms. You can understand by what you could see here. So this world's a mirror reflection of what's going on up there. In the countries where they're doing ghastly, horrible, inhumane things to people, well, some very extremely evil, powerful rulers are in place there. And the Bible has stories to describe this. Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 1, I believe, where the prophet Daniel in the Old Testament talks about his visitation by the archangel Gabriel.
I have a question I
And
want to ask you.
yeah,
Where do you fit in, like in the Garden of Eden with the snake? I think an original translation could be was actually a bipedal reptilian. Like where do the reptilians fit into your cosmology?
so a lot of people they think that the Satan might be a reptilian being. Um, the Bible actually specifically refers to Satan as a man. So I tend to think that the watchers themselves were humanoid. So um, he did manipulate a serpent. So Satan has the ability to basically just take over the mind of anything he wants. And I think he did manipulate a serpent. There are some interesting things it says there. Um, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 is the first reference in the Bible where God pronounced the war that was going to be ended between Satan and man and God, between Satan and God. It was going to be ended here on earth. And why was Earth chosen for this battle? So if there's life in all the cosmos, why is Earth significant? It's because the rebellion against God started on this planet. So out of all the septillion stars and their associated planets are out in the vastness of this cosmos, this particular planet happens to be the spearhead of where the rebellion was initiated from. And so God wants to end the rebellion on this planet. So he came to Earth as a human being because of that. And he created humanity so he would have a body to inhabit while he came here, and that he would lift up this people in order to be part of his defeat of the devil. And in Genesis 3:15, it says, the seed of the woman, right? So it's talking about the seed of the woman will stomp on the serpent's head and he will bite his heel.
So is the
So,
reptilians
yeah.
like a serpent, or do you think reptilians are a type of native or the ET? Do you have any view on the
Uh,
reptilians?
so I've heard a lot about a reptilian species that's out there. I don't doubt that. In fact, looking at the Bible says that among the angels, there's tens of thousands and tens of millions of thousands and basically innumerable. Uh, if you think about the size of our cosmos, um, the last number I got was 22 septillion stars that they were able to catalog as an estimate from Hubble. Each star having one or more planets. Septillion. I mean, honestly, if you were to grab a single grain of sand, uh, septillion is a number so large that this planet doesn't come close to 70 septillion grains of sand.
Yeah, I think the number of
It-
galaxies, something like 3 trillion galaxies now they've got
yeah.
estimated.
So the vastness is incomprehensible. Um, and so that there's so many beings out there, the amount of variety of life out there will boggle the imagination. So certainly, we even have reptiles here on this planet. So why wouldn't there be some kind of reptilian humanoid type creature? I also know a lot about the mermaid stuff. Seen some documentaries and read some stuff on that. That there's a aquatic ape. Apparently, that's what they call it. They don't look like us so much. They look more like a cross between a dolphin and a human because they got arms um, and hands. They make spears to hunt with, but they live way down in the deep. Um, so, got all these sort of humanoid things. Apparently, God likes this shape of the primate type shape. And he's probably made a lot of the more higher advanced species like this because it's such a flexible shape. We got hands, right?
Yeah, like the
And
Greys seem to be
yeah,
humanoid, two arms, two
uh-huh.
legs.
And we could talk and stuff. So not to say that we're the only species that has these attributes. There's probably other species that have like they'd be like tripping out if we saw it. And that's part of why I like Star Trek and all these outer space movies because I like to see the different things people come up with. And I'm like, yeah, there's probably thousands of examples of every variation you could think of. Um, as for whether Satan was actually a reptilian or not, he was a member of, he was a watcher. He was among the B'nai Elohim. He's mentioned in the book of Job with the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. So he was, and honestly think he convinced these other fallen angels to mate with the humans while he didn't do it himself. So he knew how to be an instigator and get right up to the line and do just enough to not cross it himself so that he wouldn't be thrown down into Tartarus
Yeah.
because he's the prince of the power of the air. So there's a lot of people like Satan down in hell. No, no, he's still kind of doing stuff. He's confined to this planet, although he may have. I'm sure he still has many otherworldly contacts.
Yeah, Shikami,
Uh,
it's similar in Buddhist cosmology. The evil one is Mara, but Mara lives in a heavenly realm. He's in the sixth heaven of the central sphere, and he's got a lot of power over the earth, but he's not in hell.
yeah, interesting. And so I'm sure he still has these connections, but he rules the coop here on Earth, and everything's going to go down in as far as cosmic sense, where everything's going to be concluded as prophesied in the Bible. That's happening here on this planet, and it's because the rebellion started here on this planet with Lucifer, and it's going to end with him on this planet. It said that the seed of the woman in Genesis 3 was Jesus eventually. I mean, Adam and Eve had kids, and they had kids, and they had kids, and 77 generations later, I believe it is, Jesus was born. So that's the seed of the woman. If he is a real biological seed, then why wouldn't the seed of the serpent, who's also mentioned in Genesis 3:15, be a biological seed? But that would make him a Nephilim. So my theory is that Lucifer held off on that trump card. He's like, you know what? One of these days I'm going to have a kid, but I'm going to wait until the opportune moment. And we're going to use a lot of genetic experimentation through the millennia. And we're going to really hone in on what makes a perfect human being. And this kind of ties into what a lot of New Agers think that and the ancient astronaut folks, they think that we're on the age of Aquarius and we're entering into a new age of enlightenment and genetic engineering is for our benefit. That the aliens are going to come and save us from ourselves and all of this stuff, right? Well, there is something that they're doing with his genetics. I think that they're working on creating a master human being, and they're getting all this ready so Satan can finally mate with a human and have a child himself, and that will be the Antichrist. And this will be a Nephilim, but he'll be like Nephilim 3.0, and he'll be a regular-sized person. But he'll probably have supernatural power. The Bible seems to indicate that. He'll be able to call fire down from the sky. Although maybe some of this will be technologically achieved. He will have otherworldly alliances. There's indications of that in the book of Daniel, where it talks about how he will be even at war against otherworldly forces, and he will overcome them. There's indications of like false flag wars going on in the Bible, where you have two bad guys going to war against each other for the explicit purpose of one defeating the other and saying, "Ooh, look how good I am. Everybody need to unite under me now," when the whole thing was staged. Satan is a master coordinator of chaos. So even a lot of his beings that are doing his bidding may not even be aware of it. They may be playing their part not knowing it. They might even be rebelling against him because there's fighting amongst their ranks. Satan's house is divided.
That makes sense to me. That does make
yeah.
sense with what the globalists are doing.
Yes. World Economic Forum, I certainly see them being a part of this. They may actually interface with some of these other worldly beings on a regular basis. And
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you see the guy, what's his name? Charles.
I mean, Klaus Schwab?
Klaus, right. Yeah, Klaus Schwab.
Klaus
He's
Schwab.
wearing this weird looking avatar outfit like he's some kind of a god or something. It's like, dude, you forgot to take that off after you left your Satan ceremony, you know?
Yes, so obvious, isn't it?
Yeah. So these guys are in the know on a lot of these otherworldly connections. And the interesting thing is the Bible talks about this stuff, these otherworldly factions that are formed. But here's another thing that I came to conclude after years of research, because when I first came out with this, all I'm seeing is the demonic, right? It's like, oh, this is demonic deception, all this bad stuff going on, whatever. Even though kind of in the back of my head, I'm thinking, are they all bad? Are they really all bad? I mean, the dragon dragged a third of the stars, not all of them. So Satan did deceive all the angels. And my understanding of angels and angelic chariots, that's technology. They're UFOs. Angels are aliens by definition. They're intelligent beings, not from Earth.
Yeah, they're Davis.
The only difference is, people get confused about the physicality and the use of technology and stuff, even though the Bible's pretty clear. Technology's in the picture. Ezekiel chapter 1, Ezekiel chapter 10. You see this spaceship type thing opening up a transdimensional portal to God's kingdom. If it's a transdimensional spacecraft, interdimensional, it would have the ability to open a portal, a transdimensional portal to God's throne. So that shouldn't be hard to explain. It's just the whole paradigm shift of like updating your lens. You're reading about chariots. They have this picture of a chariot, this thing with wheels pulled by a horse, and chariot of fire. And you have to back up and be like, wait a minute, it's flying. Why would it need wheels? It wouldn't. So, okay, eliminate the wheels. The horses of fire. Do you really think that's horses of fire? Could it have possibly been just fire and they only knew the only way you could move a chariot was by pulling it with a horse? So we'll just call it horses of fire. As for the word chariot, it's vehicle, so this is just the funkiest looking chariot I ever seen in my life. It's got eyes everywhere, and it's got wings. Here's another interesting detail about that chariot. It's got beryllium on the bottom. The Bible actually specifically mentions beryllium, which is what we currently use for space nozzle or for rocket nozzles on spacecraft, because it's a very heat resistant metal. Other interesting detail, the wings on the top and the wings on the bottom touch on the distant end. That forms saucer from a side view. The wings don't flap. The wings are straight wings and they touch at the distant end. So he's literally describing a saucer. And then when you turn it on the side, it's a circle with, concentric circles the portals on the side could very well have been the eyes that he's talking about. The lights all over the place. Uh, very, very much on the nose in terms of describing a spacecraft there. And in Second Kings, Elijah, the Old Testament prophet Elijah, is literally taken up off the ground, levitated into the air, sucked up into this thing, and flies off to heaven. So you got angels using advanced technology. That is very clear. The only difference being the Bible has a broad category of beings in the heavens, whereas the word angel has a specific definition. It means messenger generically, but Jesus, when he's referring to otherworldly beings as angels, he said angels neither marry nor are they given in marriage, and they are immortal. They do not die. They can't die. That's different. That's not what most people think of aliens. They think of them as biological beings that get old and die, just like us. They think of death as universal, but the Bible does not say that. Death is actually an unnatural state of being. It is a curse that God enacted because of disobedience, and it's a curse that he plans on getting rid of. It's the unnatural curse of death. That's what the cross is all about and everything. And it's something that I think there's good guys out there that maybe they're like us. Maybe they actually sinned, but they were mortal when they did it. They didn't reach that angelic state yet, because that angelic state is the highest level of being. We're created as a transdimensional species that God originally intended for us to not physically die, but rather to eat from that tree of life until we reached a certain age of spiritual maturity, and then we would translate into this higher state of being that would be completely immortal, incapable of even dying. And at that point, we would have abilities like supernatural abilities. This is really what God is going to do already. The Bible talks about it. It says when Jesus comes back, when we're saved and we're going to be raised from the dead, that we're going to be translated and we'll have a new nature. We'll be like the angels. Jesus said that in Luke 20:36. So we'll have. But then when they go through this translation, they're supposed to move to another phase of life that no longer includes reproduction. They're connected to God on this higher plane. So in a way of speaking, it's like we're like butterflies. We go through a metamorphosis that's just this amazing thing, and we'll probably glow and all kinds of trippy stuff. I think that that's what happened out in the cosmos, that there's versions of Adam and Eve that were planted all over there. This is where the angels came from. That they all came from different planets, and a lot of different planets. Bible actually even talks about it. There's a word called the host of heaven. That literally means life forms in the heavens, out in the sun and the moon and stars, in the cosmos. And that term's used 18 times in the Bible. It doesn't say what the hosts are, though. So some of them might be mortal. They might not have reached that age of spiritual transformation yet. And others are immortal. And there's good ones and there's bad ones, faithful and fallen. If there's others out there that sinned, but they heard about what happened here on earth, then they would want to come here and find out. Like, I don't want to die, I heard that there's an answer, that the creator of the universe, who's on this planet over here in the northern hemisphere, created a way so that we could get past this problem of mortality. And they probably come here to find out more about Jesus. That would be the mortal ones. But then there's faithful good ones. The Bible says there's faithful angels that come here and they help us all the time. They come in disguise, and they could look however they want. They wouldn't want to tip the balance. They do have their version of a prime directive, you could call it. So prime directive in Star Trek is anthropological. You're not supposed to give guns to the Indians, right? Because then it just creates problems. So let's just hang back and let them do their squabbles and try not to interfere too much. That's the anthropological perspective. But God's perspective is different. God's perspective is the balance. It's understanding and respecting the free will that he gave us. So he gives us enough truth to counterbalance the deception so that it weeds out what's in our heart. What do we really want? That's what God is really interested in. He wants to know what we hope for. Do we hope in a God of love, or could we care less? Are we more interested in elevating ourselves and our own ideas, um, intellectual superiority, or achieving our own agenda? Or would we rather have a more simpler mindset and just, do you really wish that the whole point of everything had something worthwhile behind it, like love? Um, Honestly, to me, there's no reason to create anything at all if it's not that desire to have children and to share and to express joy. And you know, parent has kids, hopefully, because they want to expand their love and teach their kids things that they would want them to know, to help them in their lives. And it's almost unexplainable why a person um, would want to have kids. But everybody will have different stories. But at the heart of that, I believe, in most situations, it's love, the desire to grow, the desire to expand. And God is the ultimate father. The reason he created is because he wanted kids. He didn't want to force them to obey. He's not, this authoritarian. He wanted love. He created love. He created us with that capacity, but you can't have love without free will. And so he came here as a human being, leading by example and enduring a life as a mortal human being, which just coming here probably was hard. He left infinite joy and God's presence, which I had been in, and it's just unbelievably intoxicating in terms of the amount of love that you experience in God's presence. If you've ever experienced a split nanosecond of that, your life will be changed and you would long for it for the rest of your life. And that's what he left coming here. So this is just like, what a wet blanket. And the capstone of that life is being crucified and excruciating death to get us past this whole sin problem. And he did that to show that his heart, like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. I love you. I created you because I want you to have a point in your existence and I'm here for you. But you need to come to me on my terms. You can't invent your own way to get to me. And I think that that's what a lot of beings out there, they want to know. They want to experience that. And unlike the Star Wars version of reality or the Star Trek version of reality, where there's like, where is God? He's still a mystery, right? Well, among the civilizations that send, some of them would be still just as confused and lost and divided in their opinions about God as we are here on Earth. However, there's lots of planets out there. 2/3 of the angels didn't sin, so they actually know who God is. Flying around in spaceships, going to his throne, visiting him, visiting friends on planet Heaven, where the capital is, New Jerusalem.
I wonder what do other Christians think about life in other galaxies around the world? Do Christians have conflicting beliefs about that?
Yes. I read on Christianity Online today, just out of curiosity, like, well, what do they say about it, extraterrestrial life? And it literally says the Bible doesn't say anything about ETs. And I'm like, scratching my head, like, really? Did you ever ask yourself what an angel is? But again, it goes to all these misconceptions about physicality and technology. And, to me, the Bible is plain as day about that. I'm reading it and I'm like, how can you miss this? They're reading the same Bible, but they're somewhere else. Their
I
mind
guess
is,
different. I guess for evidence, like you rely on the Bible. That's your
yeah.
evidence rather than. I
For
guess
me,
the
yes.
ancient astronauts are trying to look at archaeology and physical evidence and things like that.
And the ancient astronaut camp tends to look at the Bible. Those most of them aren't Christian. Uh, Zachariah Sitchin, um, Eric von Daniken. Um, they'll quote from the Bible, sure. They quote from the Bible all the time, but their main deal is to say that the early prophets and the Christians, and even today, it's all a big misidentification. That it is actually God who seeded humans on Earth long ago. They take Genesis 2:7. God formed Adam and Eve from the dust of the earth with his hands. A personal creation. Um, to me, that's intimacy. That speaks to his love for us. It also speaks to him wanting to be personally involved with his hands in the construction of the being that he was going to inhabit. Um, there's an interesting side note. Um, God the Father has to exist outside of time space altogether. No being can do this. Only God can do this. Exist outside of time space. In the beginning, he created time space. That's his canvas of which all life is going to live inside. Then he wanted to enter that canvas and be participant inside of it. So he needed a body in there to do that. Did he just snap his fingers and make one? I don't think so. I think he did something more interesting than that. I think he entered in time somewhere in the middle because he's outside of time space. He can enter anywhere. And he entered into the body of Mary and made himself a human being, uh, an original creation, just like Adam and Eve. But he didn't make himself a body with his hands. He just spoke, and Mary became pregnant. And Mary had a child. That child was Jesus. That was his body. And he grew up in time space, lived his life, died on the cross, and went down into the underworld, released the captives, did all that, went to go sit by, sit on the throne in heaven, um, in the capital heaven. But then at that point, he could have went back in time now that he's in time space, and he could have been back all the way in time before nothing existed, because the Bible literally refers to Jesus as the firstborn of all creation. So he went back in time because he has control over all time space. And being back in time, now he has a body. Then he speaks all of the life, starts making life all across the universe. And then he forms Adam and Eve from the dust of the earth, what, a billion or so years later, 5 billion years later. And he's actually his own creator in that
I guess
respect.
the
But he could
Bible's
do
your
this.
source. The
Yes.
Bible's your source for evidence. I mean, other people could say, "Well, what's your evidence?" Kind of circular reasoning. If the Bible's your source for evidence, so I guess I understand you have faith. Like you believe it. Like, I'm a non-Christian, so I got sort of more of a Buddhist worldview, but I guess you have faith.
Yeah. I have faith. What's my source? I mean, I do refer to a lot of science, does cross cross uh, paths or whatever, cross streams with like different things that you said about the multidimensional nature of the universe. My understanding of angelic beings being physical, probably somewhat in agreement with your own thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's true. Yeah.
yeah, it's just where I differ maybe is the nature of God. I don't know if Buddhism teaches that God is love.
Well, in
Um,
Buddhism, we have like natural laws, natural force of the universe, but there's no personal God in Buddhism. Like the law of
right,
karma, goes throughout the
right,
universe, the law of cause and effect. But it says, in a
yeah,
sense, we each create our own universe with our karma, but we don't have the concept of a personal God making decisions.
right. And that's where the Bible is radically different because the
Yeah, yeah.
Bible casts God as like ridiculously personal. Personal to the point of joking around with people. Um, if you've seen the series The Chosen, fantastic series. I mean, I just feel like I'm there. Um, tripping out with the apostles like, this is God as a human, and he's joking around. And just the thought of that he's a personal being, that he cares about us. For me, that gives a level of meaning and purpose to life that transcends everything. And of course, I mostly believe I came to this new level of faith that I don't even know if you could call it faith. When Jesus said his name in my ear, I'm like, really? You're physically here. And I felt his love hit me. And the Apostle Paul actually said that the level of revelation he received, he didn't really give himself credit for the things that he did, because he was at that point where, like, it wasn't even faith anymore. He just knew, um, because he saw God, he spoke with him, and he heard him, and just totally, he blinded him actually when he first saw him, and then he needed a miracle to have that fixed. So the things that happened to him, I mean, that just changed him. And I had this happen to me, and so that's all I didn't need to go run around hunting for faith, but um, I noticed that the Bible makes a big thing about faith, hope, and love. Love is the reason, faith is the how, but the hope is what's in your heart, right? What do you really want? Um, Honestly, I don't think I'd want to live if God wasn't love, because then I'd have to start questioning, why do I even exist? What's the point? Uh, if I'm not going to be with God who loves me, um, then I'm what? I'm just existing. What's my purpose? What's my function? Um, Death to me doesn't even seem natural either. And if you've ever been to a funeral, there's just nothing that really seems natural about it. Um, as much as people try to explain it, the circle of life and all of this, death doesn't seem natural. And that desire to want there to be some greater meaning to life, I think is there in a lot of people. And of course, that's at the heart of a lot of religions. And your average anthropologist would tell you, people create faith because it's a survival coping mechanism. Um, but there's things that happen that are really difficult to explain. Um, and of course, that's part of why I was searching all those years, getting into all this paranormal stuff. I needed to see that there was some other side. And of course, the earlier days of my life, I knew that there was another side. The veil was thin. I perceived a lot of things, ghosts. I once communicated with a ball of light in the jungle of Panama. Uh, had these bizarre experiences. Astral projecting, I popped out of my body partly, and these six beings surrounded me and started grabbing all over me and freaking me out. Um, so I knew that reality was greater, and I was seeing evidence all around me of that. But then the God behind everything, the God behind all creation. Something in me always wanted there to be a God of love. But in my younger days, I didn't have that evidence other than my great grandmother telling me, God loves you. Um, but I didn't know it for sure, um, personally, like until I dreamed it and experienced him touching me. And then that was a level of evidence that was undeniable for me. Um, for different people, it'll be different reasons. Some people become to faith through intellectual means, but I do think that is kind of on a lighter level. Uh, However, I do think that there's a point at which, if you just hope, let's say you don't have it in you to believe, like, well, no, I need more evidence. I need more evidence. And I've encountered so many people like that. No, I have to have evidence. I need solid, concrete proof, and I can't believe it unless I have that. Um, then you could look at that hope, and you could say, well, what do you want? Um, because honestly, if somebody really wants something, all it takes is talking to God, hoping that he's real. And he will see that and give you credit for faith for it. Because he'll be like, look, he's talking to me. At that point, it's on him. It's on him to communicate back. If he's really a personal God, he should. He should do it. And I do recommend to anybody that has had questions or wondered, um, have they actually honestly sat down and had a conversation with God just to see if he's personal? Ask him to give him a dream. Ask him to have something happen in their life. Like, God, I'm reaching out to you. I don't know if you're real. You know, I see a lot of reasons why not. Look at the evil in the world. How could a God of love do that? I've heard that argument a lot. Uh, the Bible actually talks a lot about it. It has to do with free will, has to do with the nature of love. Um, you can't have love without free will, period, because love requires choice. Um, we would be just robots doing what we're programmed to do if we did not have that divine aspect of choice that God put in us. But God respects our freedom, and it's pretty insane the degree to which He respects it, according to Christianity, um, giving us the choice of life or death, giving us the choice to love or to hate, to be selfish or giving. Those are all choices, and He led the way by coming here and showing us how to live. But if we're not interested, then we're showing Him that we don't really have a hope for a God of love. We have hope for lots of other things, but because we don't want accountability, we would rather just scrap the love part. And that's where I think the hope part is really important, is because if you don't have faith and love, yeah, that's an okay idea, but I can't prove it, so set that aside. Then what do you really even want? And I think these are the things that God is looking at, and He's looking for. It says in the Bible that He's searching our hearts all the time, and obviously He wants to know what we want. Who do people say I am? That's what Jesus asked the apostles. And like, what are they saying about me? Because He's looking. He wants to know who's looking for me. And I guarantee you, anybody who actually really honestly looks for Him will find Him. Yeah. And even when they're like messing with Ouija boards and stuff like that. Because I could say that from personal experience, I had a lot of times in my younger days before I was really faithful or anything, before I had that dream, that I was searching all that time and like doing all kind of wacky stuff. And man, I had a lot of close calls. Um, well, not to mention the fact that I've almost died at least 20 times. Um, Near-death experiences just left and right. Almost bitten by poisonous snakes, almost buried alive. Well, I was buried alive once, and miraculously got out of that somehow. Um, got sucked into a whirlpool once, almost went off over a waterfall, uh, got hit by a car twice. Um, all these near-death experiences happened. So, I knew that God wanted me here, but then playing around with all of this dangerous spiritual stuff too, getting my house all haunted like I did. Um, Crazy what God let me do, and I still came out the other end of that semi-sane.
I
And
guess that's part of being a seeker, right? You try things until you find something that you like.
exactly, and I was not I would like to say that I was like Moses in the sense that my curiosity overweighed the fear. In the Old Testament, it says Moses is walking along and he sees this burning bush and it's not being consumed. And he's like, instead of like, I'm a demon, turning around and running the other way, freaking out. I think a lot of Christians are like that. They see something even slightly out of the kilter, something that doesn't fit in their box of reality, and they want to put a demon label on it. Oh, all aliens
Yeah,
are
like the
demons.
UFOs, Christians, many think
You
of
know?
them as demons, right?
Yeah.
Fundamentalist Christians too.
And I think a lot of them, I think some are, don't get me wrong on that, but I think that there's some good ones too. And in fact, Revelation, I have the scripture, but I'm on what they call what I call the mission of the first angel. And in the book of Revelation, it says that there was an angel flying in the heavens, and he said, he was preaching the gospel to all the people of the earth, to all tribes, to all nations, to all languages. And he was telling people, worship the one who created the earth and the oceans, the seas of water, and all the life within. So he's reminding people who the creator is, almost like they're confused about that. Like there's another message in the world saying humans were not created by God. Humans were like seeded by life from another advanced species in the cosmos or whatever. Your origin is not Genesis 2:7. God did not personally create you. You know, there's some other message or many other messages. And this angel's purpose, preaching the gospel to humanity, is to remind us that, you know, who God is. He's the creator. And he
Hmm.
loves us.
I have a
And
question. I want to
yeah,
ask you about the Catholic perspective. They seem to be ahead of the Protestants. I once met a Catholic priest, and he said, "Well, if the ETs actually come and land, we would ask them, you know, will they accept Jesus Christ as a personal savior, or perhaps they have another form of salvation?" So it seems like they're prepared. Like maybe I think with the Catholic secret vaults going back 1,000 years or more, maybe they know about
yes,
UFOs even before the American government did. Maybe they know a lot, so they're just
they do.
hedging their best and they're preparing in case something happens. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm sure it's in the Vatican. And I know the Pope's come out and talked about it, and his opinion is kind of like my great grandmother in terms of, you know, they're just another part of creation. Um, and I actually talk about cosmic salvation in my book, you know, because, you know, maybe some of them come here to learn about Jesus, especially if they're mortal. Um, Jesus said he had sheep of another fold and that he needed to go take care of them.
Oh,
So
is that
most
right?
Christians say that, that's the Gentiles. Well, sure, but maybe it's a bigger than that. Maybe it's a lot bigger than that. Um, there's another scripture that says in Colossians uh, chapter 20, I believe, that it says that he uh, came here to reconcile uh, between God and all things on earth and all things in the heavens. Literally says that. And it's like, wait a second, back up, say that again. There's something in the heavens that needs reconciliation with God. Could he maybe be talking about the hosts of heaven that are out there? And I honestly think that he is. Uh,
Yeah, I didn't know
so
those quotes. That is fascinating, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Uh, it definitely, I'll hook you up with. You're a scholar. You like to read some things, so I'll send you.
Such
I actually I think I already sent you my books. In that first email, you might have them.
yeah, there were
Um,
some attachments there with your emails. Yeah, I think I have your books.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mentioned that you could just do a search for cosmic salvation in there, and then those scriptures are actually listed in there. I quoted in Christian Ufology, I believe I have over 750 scripture references to back
Wow.
up what I'm saying. So I believe in ETs and extraterrestrial life just as much intuitively as I do because the Bible actually tells me that it's real. There's tons of evidence in the Bible
Yeah, I
that there's
read
a
Paul
reality out there.
Wallace's some of his research and his videos. He's saying in the Old Testament, Jehovah was one of various. There was like actually various ETs originally in the Old Testament,
Mm,
and Jehovah was one of them. I think that's what Paul Wallace said in his research.
okay. Um, yeah, and just like I said, that Jesus, you could say that he's an ET in the sense that he is an intelligent being, he's a physical being, and he's beyond Earth. I won't say he's not from Earth because he was from Earth, but he also precedes Earth, even creating the planet. Uh, it's just that he's in a class by himself because he's able to go outside of time space. He communicates with the Father directly. He came directly from the Father and is one with the Father on a level that we are not. He's God, we're not. So the ETs, um, especially dating back to the days of Genesis 6 and all those Nephilim, and I mean, it got so bad that God brought the flood of Noah to wipe them off the earth because if he didn't do that, they would have exterminated everything. It says all flesh corrupted its way. that includes the animal kingdom. I mean, that's why God had to get Noah to build an ark and save the animals. He's concerned about the animals too.
I think of Noah's Ark
Yeah.
as one of these. There's various descriptions of these 200-mile across motherships that go traverse around the galaxy. So think of Noah's Ark as something like that, bringing all these beings to Earth, and the biblical story is kind of a metaphor of that.
Okay. Um, but anyway, that the flood was to wipe out these Nephilim because they were that bad. Um, and these watchers, they wanted to be worshipped. And all of the ancient pantheons were created because they were glory hounds. You know, they wanted to be. They were following Lucifer's example. They wanted to be God, and so Lucifer led the way. He was the first to say, "No, I'm God." And then they're like, "Hey, I like what he did." And Lucifer's an orchestrator of chaos, so he's like, "Okay, you want to go do that too? I know it angers God, so go ahead." Even though in the end, I'm going to be the man. You're going to be answering to me. Uh,
Yeah, that
that's
reminds me of reptilian
yeah.
control through the globalists going back 2,000 years, like creating chaos, wanting to get
Hmm.
control. That's sort of my interpretation of it.
Yeah. And they all wanted to be worshipped and everything, and they still do. And Jesus said, "As the days of Noah were, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man." So he prophesied that the way it was back in Noah's day, that's how it's going to be when in the end times when he returns. And so now we're seeing all these UFOs flying around and stuff. And in 2020, the Navy came out and said, "Okay, it's not a weather balloon. Uh, we knew that you all knew it all along, and you were doubting us, and we weren't coming clean. But now we're coming clean. We don't know what the heck it is." And then they still dance around it. They're like, "Oh, non-human biological entities. Just call it an alien, okay? Call it an ET." They don't want to do that. It's
So do you
just
think
trying
there's
to.
going to be a culling of the world's population coming up then?
Yeah, yeah. The
Could
Bible says
be.
that.
And some people have said the ETs have told them there'll be something like this happening.
Yeah, there's going to be all kinds of things happening. Talks about a lot of stuff happening in the end times in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. Talks about otherworldly battles. Uh, Jesus did say the heavens will be shaken, and it'll be like the days of Noah. And what happened in the days of Noah? These beings actually came down and interfaced in humanity to such an extent that they were reproducing with us, having children.
Yeah, there
Um,
could be a culling of the population. That's a concern.
so I see that possibly as a return to open contact with extraterrestrial beings from other worlds in our society. That's a possibility for our future. In which case, a lot of Christians are going to be really confused if they're refusing, absolutely refusing to accept the idea that the universe is populated with other life. Then they're
Yeah,
going
it
to be
seems
forced
hard
to.
for Christians, like the Abrahamic religion, like Islam and Judaism. I think Islam accepts some ETs have the idea, but it might be negative, like the jinn, negative view on ETs. But
The
yeah, for
jinn, yeah,
Christianity, it's hard.
actually, yeah. In my book, The Strong Delusion, I devote half that book to Islam. Um, and the other worldly connections there. For example, Muhammad, when he was a little kid, apparently um, an archangel took him and did heart surgery on him. And it describes it in this sort of symbolic language, but then it says that some kids saw it and freaked out and thought this being was killing him and ran off and told their mother. So that doesn't match with just a symbolic, oh, God did, or it's an angel purified his heart, blah, blah, blah. No, no, he was actually ripping him open and doing something with his organ. And when they came back and found him, he had stitches on his chest.
I
This
had
was
no
written
idea
in
about that.
this was written in the 6th century BC or
Hmm.
AD, 6th
Yeah.
century. Heart surgery, no one would be doing heart surgery back then with stitches and stuff, but that's what it actually says. And the jinn themselves are actually same exact thing as Nephilim. They match the exact identical description. Um, they're known as pranksters generally, uh, usually up to no good.
So how would Islam
Yeah.
adapt to ETs being all over the universe? Would it be just as hard as the Christians for Islam?
I think they'll be a little more accepting of it. I'm actually predicting that an otherworldly Jesus will show up, uh, descending to earth in this big spectacle. It won't be the real Jesus. He will say he's Jesus, but not who Christians think he is. That he is a son of God, just like we are a son of God, and he'll morph his message to be more New Agey, and then he will give credence to the religion of Islam. And their leader, the Mahdi, he will say, that's the person you need to listen to. And he will give all of his credence and endorsement to that person. And the Bible actually talks about a false prophet that will come in the future to endorse the Antichrist. And the false prophet will speak like a dragon, but have the appearance of a lamb. So the appearance of a lamb will be like somebody who looks like Jesus, all the trappings, but the words coming out of his mouth are pretty violent.
It's hard to imagine the world getting
yeah.
united. Like our world seems so divided now. It's hard to imagine them uniting around anybody.
Uniting, yes, it's an amazing thing that it talks about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It calls it a strong delusion will cover the planet after this huge event where the restrainer is taken out of the way. This restrainer that is currently holding back all the forces of evil from really totally invading this planet, it's currently here, and it will be removed in the future. My theory is that that's what we call the rapture. You've probably heard of this, where all the
Yeah, I've
Christians are
heard of
taken
it.
off the planet. I think that it's actually us. Our presence here on this planet is creating like a force field, and it's preventing evil from completely just overrunning everything. And there's going to be this rapture. We're just going to be gone. Just boom, disappeared. Teleported
Where
out of here or
does it
whatever.
go? Where do you go with the rapture?
There's going to be a fleet of angels, and their angelic chariots going to come swooping around the planet, teleport us out of here. And it's going to happen in the blink
Well,
of an eye.
experience have described that, but people being taken up onto motherships during a disaster of some kind. That's
Really?
the thing. Yeah. Some experience have been told that's what's going to happen. They'll be told where to go, and they'll be picked up or zoomed up onto craft.
Okay. I think it'll be something like that, honestly, because angels fly in chariots, in these angelic chariots that I think they're intergalactic, interdimensional spaceships.
Yeah.
It will circle the planet and remove us. There goes the restraining power that goes with us. And
They might just
then,
take some people, might leave some behind and take the chosen ones.
yeah, right. I've actually asked for permission to stay, even though I think I'm in the camp that would be taken. If he wants to take me, okay, I'm all right with that. But I would like to stay to continue to preach the gospel during that time, because my book, Christian Ufology, literally predicts this event happening. So I think that would be.
That's the time to talk.
The fact that I have this published book already saying, hey, this is going to happen, and then it happens, I think would give it a little weight somewhat. And if I'm still here to talk about it, then maybe it would help. But of course, the evil forces will be given carte blanche. Okay, you have a lot more authority to do what you want, and the Antichrist will rise to power. But then there'll be all these warring factions and all kinds of chaos. The book of Daniel says that the first 3.5 years of the Antichrist assuming power will be peaceful. And he will appeal to everyone, scientists, theologians, young, old, Christians, Jews, Muslims, all united under this one person. Can you imagine? Jesus is a Christian, but this Jesus will say he's a Muslim. Christians believe in Jesus. He's the head of Christianity, but he's also a Jew, and he will be a Muslim. He will say, that he believes in like a new agey, updated version of Islam. So he'll unite those three religions, and then he'll also have this scientific component because he comes from another world. He's a king from another world. He might literally be, but he's not the Jesus that the real Jesus. Um, and this will be the false prophet. And then he will be endorsing this Antichrist character who will be putting an end to this. There'll be a war. I believe it's between this king in Egypt and then like Syria, the king of the north,
So
king of the
where
south.
is this predicted then?
It's in the book of Daniel.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
And
that. Wow.
it's also talked about in Revelation. You cross-reference this. It's a two-headed beast, and one of the heads is slain. So these are both these heads are like Islam, like one's Sunni, one's Shiite, and one slays the other. It's a false flag thing going on though. Um, they really probably do hate each other, or will hate each other, and one really will kill the other. But it's all orchestrated at a higher level by Satan, who's manipulating the chaos. And this will be how he gets global fame. The Antichrist will be at war for the second 3.5 years of his reign. So he won't actually have global power until the very tail end, because he's going to be at war against all these nations. Where's America at in this conflict? I don't even know at this point. I can't say whether we would be sided with the Antichrist or fighting against him. Flip a coin. Depends on who's in the White House, where our mind is at with what's going on in the Middle East. But though that chaos will also include this otherworldly alliances and all of this stuff, and it will continue to escalate till the very end. And of course, after the rapture, things are just going to get progressively worse and worse and worse. A lot of people are going to end up coming to faith during that time, and they will be slaughtered. A lot of them will be killed for their faith because of it. They'll be willing to die. And then we will pick it up on satellites or whatever. NORAD be like, dude, it's all these spaceships and stuff. Remember what happened with all those people disappearing and that huge mass abduction that happened? It's going to happen again, but this time they're coming back and they're going to wipe us out. And I'm speculating after the rapture, they're going to be like saying this was a horrific attack, coming to abduct a chunk of our population off the planet. I mean, who do you think you are? So we're going to have all these things set up to try to counter this from happening again. And then they're going to pick it up. They're going to see them coming. And it's going to be like Independence Day, except flip-flop. The people coming are good guys and not bad guys. And it's the people on Earth and all of the chaos and war and horrific things happening on the planet. That's where the bad guys are at. And this is Jesus coming back with his saints to put an end to it and to save who's left, who managed to survive through all of this, to save them from complete annihilation. And that's kind of what the Bible describes, that when he comes back, he's going to put an end to the battles and everything. He's just going to done. And then he'll establish his kingdom here on earth. Then he will move. He'll have 1,000-year reign of peace with Jesus as king over this earth. And then he will actually transport New Jerusalem, which is a real physical city on a real physical planet, else it wouldn't be able to be transported to earth. And in the book of Revelation, it says this physical city is going to be moved from where it's at right now to the earth. And interesting tidbit about that city is its dimensions, 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles high. How can you have a
big
15?
city? Wow.
How can you have anything 1,500 miles high on Earth? Mount Everest at 5 miles high, you're reaching can't breathe anymore. Just at 5 miles, this is 1,500 miles high. So you're talking about a planet that I estimate is 272 times larger than Earth. So we have a dimensional thing happening here, I think, what's going to happen in the future. When that planet comes to Earth, it'll be planted in first heaven, and that outer, the larger planet in the higher dimension. And then this dimension we're in will be merged into that first heaven. So from our perspective, it'll look like the city's coming down when in fact we're going up. because this lower realm will cease to exist and it will expand and bring us all up into that first heaven, and then we'll be on a much larger planet. So Earth will be a bigger planet to accommodate this gigantic city.
Well, it seems so fantastical. I don't know what to think. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I can't believe it myself because it just sounds so fantastical, whether it's in
Yeah,
the Bible or not.
yeah. The Bible to me reads a lot more like Star Wars meets Lord of the Rings, and it's got so much uh, richness and variation to it. But it's both mystical and it's scientific. Um, you can analyze it through all of these different lenses, and it still comes out the same. And the most fascinating aspect of it to me is that that you got prophecy, predictive prophecy, and the bulk of the Old Testament is just packed with prophecies. Almost every page uh, is prophecies about Jesus. I mean, they were saying, hey, we're going to have a savior. We're going to have him. He's coming. He's going to do this. He's going to die on a cross. He's going to be lifted up. He's going to be speared. Over 300 prophecies were given about Jesus specifically, and every single one of them came true. But the prophecies didn't stop there. They continued, I mean, in book of Daniel, chapter 12 in the end, even talks about the increase of knowledge, the increase of our ability to travel throughout the world. You see evidence of artificial intelligence in the book of Revelation, where it says in chapter 13 that this image of the beast is a man-made thing that the Antichrist will mandate we create. It will be capable of walking, of talking, speaking, rational thought. People will wonder after it and be amazed by this thing, and it will be put in charge of a global economy. And it will implement a global tracking system for everybody. And you will have to be part of this tracking system. And if you don't buy into this and accept this mark, be part of this global system, then you won't be able to buy or sell anything. And what are we seeing now? We're seeing artificial intelligence, the rise of artificial intelligence. We're seeing them pushing for digital currency. We're talking about digital passports to control vaccinations and things like this. The World Economic Forum is all about this stuff. They want
I think the Christians will
chip.
be the biggest to resist then because they don't want
Oh,
the mark of the beast.
right, exactly. I mean, that's why a lot of Christians said there's something weird about this mRNA stuff. I don't like it. And the fact that you're censoring me when I speak an objection about it just puts more red flags. I mean, for me, that's all it took, the censorship stuff. I post something about what a doctor said, and my page on LinkedIn got ruined. I mean, they locked me out permanently. I'm like, oh, I have to start all over again. I put a lot of work into creating that account. And so I have to create it again. Then I have to mind my P's and Q's and then just talk delicately about things in certain words I just can't say at all. And
Yeah, I know. I've been censored too.
it's ridiculous. So why are they wanting to censor it? I don't think it's a whole narrative about, oh, you're spreading disinformation. People just spread disinformation about everything all the time. We've always done it. Turn on the TV. 10 minutes into it, you're going to see disinformation. Who believes everything they see on TV anyway? So why is it such a big deal when somebody voices, honestly, living is risk, and if people can't be allowed to take some risks here and there, then what's the point of living?
Yeah, we definitely both agree on the censorship issue for sure.
Oh, yeah. And so, the Bible predicts these things, and then that's also another part of what makes it so interesting to me, so fascinating is that, Bible ad, Jesus said, yeah, we're going to be seeing some otherworldly stuff coming up here. What are we seeing? Otherworldly stuff. We're seeing hints of global economy. We're seeing this machine AI beast, image beast thing in the works right now. Our cell phone is probably the closest approximation to that global tracking system right now. Who has it? I mean, pictures have metadata in it so they could track where you're taking your pictures. Why would they want to do that? Why do they want your GPS coordinate of every single picture you've taken on your phone? That's ridiculous. My phone is listening to me right now. Google Android. listens to your conversations. I had the freakiest thing happen with me on my cell phone. Me and my wife were driving along, and we're talking about we're going to the kids' soccer game, the grandkids' soccer game, and my wife says, "Oh man, I should have brought the umbrella. The sun's going to be beating hot. I don't know where I put it." My phone talked to us and said, "The umbrella's in the trunk of the car."
Wow.
And we're like looking at each
Wow.
other like, "Okay, that's creepy." When we got there, we looked in the trunk and the umbrella was in the trunk of the car.
Wow. Wow.
I'm like, okay, there's AI, but then there's just that's just creepy. But our phones are always listening to us. Alexa's listening to you. Siri's listening to you. Um, this is all consolidating into this massive compound. It's like 8 city block or whatever Google complex where they have a copy of the internet for Google. That's just Google though. There's others, and the NSA has access to all of that data.
Yeah, their
Um,
technology is certainly ahead of what we know. They have other technology we don't know about.
yeah, and this generative AI is it uses petabytes of data uh, to approximate and use pattern matching and try to figure out what you're talking about and put things together and reason with people.
So you say this goes back to the book of Daniel, this prediction of the mark of the beast?
That's Revelation chapter 13.
Oh, Revelations, yeah.
Yeah, Revelation 13. And then the book of Daniel chapter 4 talks about an increase of knowledge, wars and stuff. Jesus also talked about things that were coming down the road. Book of Luke chapter 17, Matthew 24. Um, we'll see wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. We saw it. We had a pandemic.
I did read
And
Revelations myself. I found it's confusing though. It's a lot of detail and murky imagery, and I didn't know what to make of it.
if you link it to Daniel, it makes more sense. Daniel's the Old Testament, kind of like a version. I mean, the more you know the Old Testament, the more Revelation makes a lot of sense. And I'm going through a series of Revelation in my church right now, so a lot of that stuff was happening back then. For example, if I were to tell you about the battle between the elephant and the donkey, and the donkey was able to overcome the elephant and stomp on his head and open the gates and let in the army to overcome the elephant permanently. I mean, you would probably have a general idea of like, okay, I think he's talking about Democrats and Republicans and what's going on with the border and their plan to cheat in the upcoming election. And I mean, it would be like plain as day to you. And the original audience that Revelation was written for was like reading it like that. They're like, we know what he's talking about. Yeah, neither hot nor cold, I'll spit you out. Lukewarm, I'll spit you out. Well, turns out that those 2 cities, one was known for its hot springs, the other was known for its cold springs. The cold springs were actually good. They were healthy. They were not bad. The hot spring was actually good for different reasons. It had healing benefits and properties and stuff. But the city that was in the middle didn't benefit from either of those. Their water was lukewarm and it was actually kind of nasty. They had sewage problems and stuff. So if you knew that context, then the whole "you're neither hot nor cold, I'm going to spit you out," you know, that makes perfect sense. And Revelation is packed with that kind of imagery and stuff. And so relevant for its day when it was written, 100%. However, I think that its relevance is multi-layered, and that prophecy in particular has a unique property about it. They call it the law of double reference, but it's actually more references than twice. Sometimes prophecy it echoes throughout history. Things repeat. For example, we've had more than one Antichrist. And John, the Apostle John said, we will have antichrists with an S, even though there's an emphasis that in the last there will be one in the end that is like the main one. But there have been many. So you got Antiochus Epiphanes, you got Nero, you got Augustus and Caesar and several Roman emperors. Ghastly, ghastly people, did horrific, unimaginable things. Um, and and then modern example, Hitler. Most people, okay, Hitler, his name even numerically gives you 666. Um, so there's this echoing feature. The Antichrist has always been trying to get into this world, to penetrate this world, to take over, and he keeps trying and trying and trying and trying, and eventually he's going to pull it off. Until Jesus has to come back to stop him. Other prophecies like Jesus being born, there's echoes of that in the Old Testament. Like Moses is a type of Jesus, the way that he defied death when he was born, and then Jesus defied death in a similar manner. So they echo, right? Um, and then particularly in Isaiah 14, where it's talking about Satan, and this is one that I already mentioned, Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 talk about Satan's ancient kingdom on earth before Adam and Eve. The prophecies in both of those instances start with a particular king who is a vile, horrible person. And he's operating under that spirit of the Antichrist. And in part way through the prophecy where he's giving a message to that person that's there in that day and time, then he switches gears. And then he just like starts talking about like, you walked amidst the stones of fire, you were filled with glory. You said, I shall ascend above the clouds and I will, it starts talking about things that couldn't possibly be a regular human being. And it's talking about an ancient time before. And he even refers to him as Satan, as Lucifer, the shining star. So on the one hand, he starts out talking about this king of Tyre in Isaiah, and then next thing you know, he's talking about Lucifer. It's because he's repeating Lucifer's actions and behavior back then. This person was doing the same kind of thing. And so the prophecy connects those two things together, and that's what Revelation does also. It talks about things that happened already. You literally had to accept a kind of mark and participate in this kind of emperor worship that they had in Lystra, I think it was, or Iconium, one of the cities where that was referencing in Revelation, that they actually had to offer to the god there and then treat the emperor like he's a god and burn incense for him in order to buy and sell in that city.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So there was a mark, that they had to get and buy off into that and kind of adopt some of those worldly practices that went against their conscience in order to do trade in those places. And so he's referring to that. But I think it's really interesting. We're seeing an echo here now. We're seeing a global economy. We're seeing a global tracking system. We're seeing them wanting to implement global currency, digital currency, to enforce just really domineering power, so that when they say jump, you ask how high, and that they have that absolute control over you, because that's what they wanted back then. They literally had emperor worship, and we're returning to a version of that now. I mean, a lot of these people, they're so power hungry, they practically want to be worshiped. And that's why they just want that control.
So do you think they're using the Old Testament or the Talmud as their guide? People today who want to take over the world.
Bastardized interpretations or versions. If they're using the Bible at all, it would be some kind of twisted interpretation, which I don't doubt. I mean, you hear people justifying all this horrific anti-Semitic racism under the banner of Zionism, which, I'm scratching my head now how they can turn around and actually hate Jews when Jesus himself was a Jew. He didn't hate Jews. I mean, he's a promised people, right? And anybody who says they're a Christian is actually agreeing with what it says in the Bible, that salvation is coming to the world through the Jews. Yes, there were Jews that conspired to kill Jesus. This is true. And the early Christians had a really hard time dealing with a lot of Jews that were really hanging on to that old Judaism, and they refused to get rid of it. And some of them were really violent people. But that's the human condition. Everybody's like that. You get people from other religions, even Hindus. You think of Hindus of, fairly peaceful people, but there's actually radical factions of Hindus in India. Torture, kill people. You don't, you know, as open as their religion is. I mean, they even believe in many gods and all this other stuff, so they can kind of accommodate a lot of things. But there are radical Hindus that do violent things. There's
Yeah, I guess
radical
so.
peoples from all these different religions, including Christianity, and they have some kind of bastardized, twisted version of it that's basically just supporting the hatred and selfishness that they want to endorse. Um, Nothing new.
Yeah. So we've been at it for about 2 hours. Are there other topics you wanted to cover at all?
Uh, Honestly, I could probably go another 2 hours, but you know what? I think you're. Uh, I think that this is a good point where we could stop
Yeah, I
and
guess good for
maybe I
the
could come
audience.
on
Two
some
two
other
hours
time.
is a good limit for this. No, this
Yeah.
has been really educational for me because haven't really studied much of the Bible, so this really answered some questions for me. So I thank you, John. This has been good.
Okay.
And again,
Yeah.
they can find you. Your website is johnmyler.com, correct? And even your email is jmyler@yahoo.com. People can
Yeah.
contact you.
And I give free copies of my books away to anybody who, they say you don't want to pay the price for it on Amazon or whatever, or on my website but you're still interested, you still want to know, um, just email me and ask me for a copy. All I ask is that you give me a review on Amazon. I consider it the honor system. It's not like I can control it or anything. I'll give you a straight up free PDF
Well,
and you
that's
could you
generous.
read it.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I always answer my emails. Anybody have any questions or anything like that? I always like to personally answer each one.
Great. And we'll link everything below this video too for you.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me on your show. You've been really gracious.
Oh, well, thank you, John. Thanks for coming. You've added another dimension to our talk, to our studies. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay. Goodbye
All
now.
right. So you take care. Peace and long life.